It's the state of the dungeon! It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another State of the Dungeon address. I am Rob, and the game that was played was Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, Rise of Tiamat storyline. We were down one player member. We did not have, unfortunately, the services of our halfling warrior, so we had to kind of make do, but we missed her. And all in all, though, for the most part, we had a pretty busy night. The characters ended up in Waterdeep after the final results of the little encounter with the Council of Worms. They were nice enough to bring us back to Waterdeep by virtue of Bahamut himself casting a powerful spell and sending us from his home dimension to Waterdeep, which was a little ostentatious because all I had to do was get out of the place, and I could have done the same with Teleportation Circle, but it's okay. It's all good when you got good friends, right? So we appeared at Waterdeep, a little bit in the slums, but close to a shrine of Bahamut. And from there we went on our own ways. For the most part, we went to the guild hall, and from there we got ready to kind of break up and do our own things. For the one, obviously, high on the priority list for Glint was getting the Dragon Hammer reforged, which was all scheduled to be done the next day. The others all, had various plans, but nothing very, somebody wanted to buy something. Somebody wanted to just kind of hunker down and do not much else. Corbreck decided that he had coin in his pocket. He'd been on the road, plugging himself into learning as much magic as possible. He needed a night to unwind. So he blew 500 gold on having one heck of a party. He rented out a villa and invited some hangers on and just had a good time with great brew, great food, pleasant company. Despite his desire for pleasant company, Balthagor decided to tag along with him. It was okay. That was interesting, though, because that was quite a bit different from what normally Corbrecht would do. That turned out to be somewhat fortuitous, because Glint and Kytheon stayed at the guild hall. In the night, Glint was attacked by possibly the most inept assassin ever. A honest-to-goodness devil summoned by the servants of Tiamat. It was a nasty dragon-headed devil fighting with two scimitars. It was an Absarai? Can't remember offhand, but turns out that these are the kind of things that Tiamat likes to give to her mortal servants to carry out her will. But as I said, not very competent. Despite the fact that Glint had no magical protections, the thing just popped up on his bed and stabbed him with its scimitars. Glint's a fighter. Stabbing him with scimitars is not the best way to put him down. So that just woke him up and made him mad. And since he sleeps with a hammer under his pillow, yes, he literally does that. He was ready to turn around and start fighting. Perhaps not as efficiently as if he was all loaded up and armed, but he was giving as good as he got. Eventually, the noise did rouse Kytheon, who came into the room and found out, hey, there's a second one who's also the second worst assassin in the world, because he didn't help to come in and cut Glint's throat either. He was just observing. So Kytheon banished the one that Glint was fighting, and the other one decided he was going to make for the window. Glint was not having any of that. Used his trip attack and smashed him down with hammers, and used his thunder hammer, which alerted everybody in the guild hall that shenanigans were going on. And eventually, he won. They won. The devil got destroyed. And on the heels of that, they had to start thinking, well, this is what the dragon cult has come to, is sending devil assassins after us. We're going to need to make some precautions. because we had gone and done something completely out of the ordinary. Kytheon and Glint had suffered an attack, and Corbrecht and Belthegor were fine, had a good night of it. The next day we came back to the guild hall because, well, the party was over, and found out about the attack. So we were a little upset with that. Now, personally, Corbrecht doesn't care because he can always use Leomund's tiny hut. He's pretty hard to assassinate. And if somebody pops his ward, that'll probably wake him up pretty well. So, Corbrecht isn't too worried about devils, but at the same time, if they feel that they can strike at us, clearly that means that the Dragon Cult has upped their game a bit. So, we decided that, we really had to find out what was going on. And it was at this time we found out that Bryn was no longer the guildmaster. Nobody told us that. Kind of thing that you'd think you'd know, just from hearing people talk or something. We had been in the guild hall before. Nobody told us anything about this transfer of power. But apparently, Galen, the original second in command under Bryn's father, came back. As actually was probably the best way for the guild to have gone forward. It really only survived because our group was pretty dang competent, and we basically bailed Bryn out by keeping the Grand Order an honest group. And there's no real hard feelings because the guy's a cleric of Lathander. He's not evil. He's driven, but he's not evil, and he generally means well, so he's a person that we can work with. And really, honestly, Corbrecht made inroads to try not to offend him or, try not to alienate him. So, we weren't happy with that. We especially weren't happy with Emion, who was Bryn's warlock counselor on all things magic, because he didn't tell us that Bryn had stepped down. And in truth, what it turned out was that they had a falling out and Emion left because Bryn said some pretty harsh things and blamed him for a lot of secrecy that was going on behind her back, which is true. But it was for her own good, so Emion would have said. But he didn't tell us, so we're not real happy with him either. Frickin' warlocks. So, I ended up talking to Galen. I was not happy that things had gone the way they had, but I also was not happy that members of my party had been attacked, but he did have answers. He was going to put up a hallowed spell in the guild hall to make sure that demons couldn't get in again. That would give us a measure of protection, more so than what we already had. And now we knew. They played their hand and they didn't even kill one of us. So again, the Dragon Cult failed on their face. We decided that was a good idea to spur us to move forward from this point on. And we next were preparing to go to Daggerford, which is really the closest place to where we wanted to go. Both to the Misty Forest, Misty Woods, to deal with the green Wyrmspeaker and the green dragon that we had already had an encounter with. And beyond there to go to the Silent Hills to take on the Wizard's Tower that supposedly is housing the blue dragon mask, and we know is a trap. So we let Glint forge his dragon hammer, which he managed to do. It meant a lot to him to get that done, and so now he's got his toy, and he collected the things that he needs, except for that belt of giant strength. So he had to get a belt of giant strength so that he could wield this hammer of thunderbolts. But it's a beauty. It's a nice weapon. +3 returning hammer of thunderbolts. It's your fantasy Mjolnir knockoff, but it's really good against dragons and giants. So, he's got his toy. The rest of us were kind of getting ready for what else comes next. And quite honestly, we had most of our preparations down. We were just ready to take off. So, I studied the pattern of the teleportation circle at Daggerford, and we teleported there. Once there, we kind of scoped out the town as basically just adventurers at first without, going for great notoriety. And then eventually we went in to see Istvan, the paladin who was kind of overseeing Daggerford and who had connections to Cormyr, as we found out from the Council of Waterdeep. And he was happy to see us. He was happy to get help from us. This dragon was proving to be a problem, and he had attacked several settlements. He had even attacked this town. It was not quite in shambles, but they were recovering quite clearly. And this paladin was not happy about that. Of course, he is lame. He's got an injured foot, and he can't go charging in the battle like he used to. He should be retired. But he is their foremost expert at the moment, one of the more experienced people in the area, and has the respect of the people, so he's still governing. And so we decided that we would set off. We got in with a group of elven ambassadors, that we could travel with them to get to a town that had been attacked recently, 2 or 3 days ago, by this green dragon. And so we were pursuing, so we wanted to do that. So we went to the elves. The elves were happy to have us come with them. They recognized us, and the woods are dangerous these days, clearly. So we traveled with them through the night. For the most part, it was an easy trip. No real encounters or anything. And eventually we got to the town. The town is built in trees, as is kind of an elven custom. But this was a mixed group. There were some elves, but there's some humans in this community. And they were clearly in mourning. This town had been just stricken. And they were still recovering. They were kind of staggering around as people who are just kind of coping. And there were, large funeral pyres and large plots of burial and stuff. And clearly this place had been attacked. So we went in and we talked to a few people before we ended up being steered to the warden of the town. And we talked to this person, and even though he wasn't real forthcoming with everything, we kind of had a suspicion he knew more than he let on. We found that they really couldn't help us to any great degree. We don't have a massive amount of divination or means of gathering extra information. Our methods are fairly straightforward. So the people of the town really weren't in any shape to help us, although they wished us well and hoped that we could smite the dragon. That would be a nice bit of revenge. This town was so besmitten. It was attacked in a two-pronged assault from dragon cultists and the dragon. The dragon cultist attacked from the ground. The dragon flew in through the air and breathed its horrible breath weapon at the folks who were in the upper reaches, which was deadly. And he'd also deliberately destroyed several of the bridges so that the people couldn't mobilize and defend themselves. So it was a death trap. Big part of the problem with having tree houses is unless you have some good means of getting in and out, yes, that can happen. They're not always the most defensible unless you really have a good mind for defense. Clearly they didn't. So this attack wiped out a large portion of their community. We thought it was a shame, but there was only so much we could do. We were trying to talk to the Elven Ranger who we had dealt with before. He was in the town trying to help them, but he wasn't helping them by tracking the dragon or anything. He was just helping them deal with, the dead and the arrangement of the town and possibly its defense in case of a second attack. Quite honestly, the dragons and their cultists had taken most of the value from the town, so they didn't really have much of a reason to come back. They're still in looting mode. So we, again, decided to take things into our own hands because we didn't have time to wait for the ranger. And again, the folks from the village probably didn't have anything really to help us with. So we tracked the dragon cultists. And they went on a fairly detectable track until they got to a small river or creek, where they deliberately followed the creek to try to throw off pursuit, which is a tactic that often works, but if you're diligent, you'll eventually find out where they came out, which we were. They had split up. Their full body wasn't in the direction that we had followed, but we pursued and we weren't going to let them go, so we continued on. Eventually, this took us to an area of the forest that was misty, shrouded with cobwebs and spider webs, and just had a dark and imposing aura to it. This is probably the surest sign that this place is close to the lair of a green dragon. One of our party members also remembered that this dragon had had associations with spiders before. So we knew it. We are in the right area. And we're going to force this confrontation with this dragon as soon as we can. Quite honestly, this is a battle to mend a lot of hurts. It was one of our first mixed successes / defeats as we drove off the dragon from its lair, but took some pretty grievous damage and didn't really feel like we had walked away with a win the first time we fought it. And now we get a chance to fight it again. And it also attacked us at Phandalin too, although not very effectively because it was just recently expanded to its adult size. I'm assuming that's got control of its body now, and it's pretty fearsome. So yes, we are going to have a proper knockdown, drag-out dragon fight if we can. But fighting dragons in their lair often means you have to prepare for the unexpected. All I can hope is that my spells and what everybody else has going for them will be enough to force the issue, get in at the dragon so that we can hurt it, and finally stop it from running away so we can kill it. That and there's a Wyrmspeaker with it, so this is probably going to be a two-pronged attack. We don't know a great deal about the Wyrmspeaker, which means that we know less than we did against a Rothator, which was a fight that we felt we handled pretty well. This one's dicey, and we're going into too many unknowns. So it'll be a great litmus test for our group. Are we strong enough to really hang in there against tough fights and dragons and the true masters of the dragon cult? Or are we going to have to limp away and lick our wounds and figure out another plan of attack? I know what our group wants to do, so charge we go. Although, hopefully we won't get softened up by these giant spiders on the way there. So, or whatever other guardians this thing has. We just don't know. So, let's find out what we have for next time when we have another one of these State of the Dungeon addresses. Until then, thank you for joining me. Until next time, farewell.